Good morning and welcome to SimWorld today, the second day of July and the hotness of the summer season for the SWBA rolls on. I am Marsh and we've got Sniper J in the booth this morning. Sniper, not what I was expecting to be the explosive summer in terms of the names on the move, but a big move yesterday. We'll talk that one first, and that is the Milwaukee Bucks waiving and stretching the $113 million owed to Damian Lillard to go out and sign Miles Turner to a 4-year, $100+ million deal. I mean, good morning, and my God, that's one way to be the first thing to talk about in the morning.
Yeah, good morning, Marsh. I hope all is well. It's a pleasure to be here, but when we get up talking about this amount of money, it makes me happy and sad. And I say happy because I love talking about money. It makes me sad to see that things did not work out with Mr. Damian Lillard and Giannis, because I thought that would have been a nice two-headed monster coming out of the East, but it's upsetting to see things didn't work out.
I mean, it is, but this is a huge swing for the Milwaukee Bucks, who
Hmm.
are now going to owe $23 million to Damian Lillard over the next 5 seasons. And let me make what might be a hot take. I don't know if this is or not. I haven't heard enough people talking about this, but this makes actually a ton of sense for the Milwaukee Bucks because you knew you were going to pay $50 million, 50 like two or something, three, whatever the 100. It's not a perfect split because of the increase. So like 50 plus million, you were going to pay to Damian Lillard next season, and you were going to get all of zero production out of him. But you knew you were allocating $50+ million to a singular player by waiving him, still paying him $23 million next season, and paying Miles Turner just about the same amount of money. You're taking the $50 million you were going to pay, and you're now putting it across one guy who was not going to give you any production anyway, and one guy who will. And to me, in a pursuit of Giannis and a pursuit of keeping him happy,
Hmm.
Sniper, I actually see a lot of sense in this. You were going to get zero return on $50 million. You are now going to get some return on that same $50 million for a team that's trying to win right now and has seen the East, as I've said multiple times, crumble around pretty much everybody, the Bucks included, part of that crumbling. But now you have somebody who can actually produce for you next season. To me, this makes a lot of sense. Even if the number is shocking, it's the largest buyout or the largest wave and stretch in SWBA history. All of that is surprising, but there's a lot of shreds of sense in this.
Yeah, actually, now that you done laid it out, and I know we talked before this a little bit. Now that you done laid it out in front of me, it actually does make sense, and here's the reason why. So, in the championship, we had OKC and the Pacers. Pacers came out the East, right? So every team is going to try to copycat the Pacers. Therefore, with this move, moving Miles Turner over to the Bucks, that surefire makes Giannis a four. So now, what does that mean? First off, that means Giannis is happy because all he wants to do is play the four and be able to handle the ball and bring it up and go downhill. Anyways, Miles Turner can shoot. Giannis doesn't have to shoot, or he doesn't have to shoot as much. He could be a downhill in the paint type of four man. They could bring Miles Turner out. And the league is so young in guard play, and we just seen a core of young guards win a championship. And believe it or not, in the future, I think the Bucks are going to look to get some of these young guards that's coming in or that's through the league below them, bring them up, have them play some minutes, get the experience, and try to use Giannis' leadership and Miles Turner's leadership and push this team to a top team in the East.
They when you talk about like build off of something, right? Take something as
Yeah.
the idea. Well, what did the Pacers do? The Pacers did it with a star, and I was looking up their draft picks to see what type of options they have, and of course the Bucks have none. But the Pacers did it with Tyrese Halliburton as your number
Hmm.
one, and then this like kind of hodgepodge of different dudes as the number two. And while the Milwaukee Bucks don't have quite as good of a hodgepodge of second guys, They retained Gary Trent Jr. on a very favorable $3.6 million. I think it's what, 7.5 over 2 years. They got Gary
Really favorable.
Harris on a 2 year deal for the same amount of money, generally a little bit less. They bring in Torian Prince to be also in that same $3 million range, and you while those guys aren't great, you re-sign Kevin Porter Jr. They're
Hmm.
switchable, athletic, scorable wings. They're still missing somebody on the perimeter, but the addition of Miles Turner does allow you can go on Antetokounmpo, you can go Miles Turner, you got Bobby Portis out there. Like there's makings of a
Mm.
team in an Eastern
Yeah.
Conference that's really not like was on yesterday talking with Rico about like are the Hawks the maybe the best team left behind the Cavaliers and like are they on that level? They've had a great summer, but that's the range. And now you've got a competent number two, the better, younger version of Brooke Lopez who's out the door. I really are they going to be world beaters? No, but in an Eastern Conference that was already pretty bad, it feels like they really made a step forward, regardless of what they've got to pay to a guy that's never going to suit up for them again.
Yeah. Well, 100%. 100%. And when you named all those names, all I thought of was people that haven't won that are extremely hungry and they're still in their prime.
Mm-hmm.
All those guys are just hitting late 20s or early 30s and they're hungry. Like they'll do anything to win. They'll take a pay cut. They'll dive on a loose ball. They'll give the ball to the best player every single time down the court. As long as it involves them winning a championship, a lot of those guys will do whatever it takes. And I think that's what that organization is looking for.
They are in a position. They've got a lot of guys that fit in as number what sevens on. There's a lot of number sevens on a postseason roster on their current roster, but there's also guys that you probably look at and say, okay, we think we can make some things happen with what we have, and so long as Giannis is here, we are going to have a chance. Let's go to Minnesota. Minnesota, kind of an early, I think, loser for a lot of teams or a lot of opinions with Nikhil Alexander walking out the door. He's part of that Atlanta Hall. And they retained Julius Randle. They retained Naz Reid. You're obviously building this, and the big fault of this team coming in was that they didn't have a point guard, right? Mike Conley didn't look that great. Nikhil Alexander Walker was great in the postseason. Yet their two draft picks, Pooh Lewis in the first round, and a snag in the second round, Kayshawn Ship, who's kind of a more of a wing. What does this tell you about the Wolves' confidence and belief in the roster that they have currently? If they were so willing to say we're going to spend the money on these forwards and we're going to let a guard at a position of need walk out the door.
I it to me it seems like they felt like they could have did better with the position that walked out the door. And no is what I call him. I know him personally, Mr. Alexander Walker. I played against him when he was at VT. Um, Good person. I think they're looking for a defender like him, but they also need a kind of a second guard that can score next to him. And I think that's something that Mr. Lewis can bring, a scoring threat besides Mr. Anthony Edwards, but beside him. Like Ant is going to do his thing regardless. But
Mm-hmm.
if they have a 1-2 punch, it's better for everybody else on the court. And it's already still a defensive oriented team.
So one of the things that I really liked about the Timberwolves draft is they got again Kaishan Ship with the 31st pick. Ship was really good at St. John's. You know his big challenge was consistency, but he's a good shooter. He's there aren't a lot of parts of Kaishan Ship's game that screams not ready for the SWBA outside of his age tag of being 23. Pooh
Right.
Lewis, much of the same. Hyper athletic guard, can get into the paint, serviceable defender, can score, can create for himself, and the similar knock. He's 22. They're two of the oldest guys in the class. What the decision to let Nikhil Alexander walk tells me is that this is a Minnesota team that must internally feel, and from everybody I've spoke to that has some type of thoughts around it, they've got to feel confident about those two guys because
Yeah.
you don't allow yourself to get weaker out of position and not feel good about what you have inside. Now, obviously, you have to make some type of financial trade off, but this is also very reminiscent of some of the moves we've seen contenders make. And to varying degrees of success to bring in rookies. Like you look at the Golden State Warriors have made a point of trying to bring in older players. The same can be said of the Denver Nuggets, where they say, hey, we are going to allow our young guys to develop, and that cost head coaches and GMs jobs. But now you look at the Nuggets and you say, okay, well, they've got actually a lot of really good, like, promising pieces if they pop, which is not what you want to necessarily think about entering in, but like if Peyton Watson pops, if Julian Strother pops, Christian Brown last season did pop, it kind of feels like Minnesota's going that route. Like, hey, if we hit on one of these two guys to add into
Yes.
our roster, I think there's a lot of confidence in Minnesota that they didn't, despite all the great things that Nickeil Alexander-Walker brought, I feel like they think they must be able to get 50% of the output for pennies on the dollar with what they've got on the roster currently.
Man, you just said it the best. Pennies on the dollar, right? They're sending a guy that's in the league eyes is a good guy, serviceable. He's upcoming and he's going to want to get paid more money. They sent him away to a team where he could actually try to win and earn more money, and they're going to bring in guys that's similar or not similar in a sense, but make up his skill set within two, and they hope one can fill the void just enough, and then they're going to pay him a little money, and they're going to win because this team still has a very good chance to win, and they're so young.
They're very young. I mean, you've got Terrence Shannon Jr. at 25 years old. You've got Rob Dillingham, who couldn't make his way into the rotation, but at 21. Of course, I mean, Ant is only 24. Just those two guys, plus 23-year-old Kaishan Ship. Like, this is a young team, but a very experienced. Like, 4 years in college is not insignificant. Like, I know I've spoken at length about, if you take a guy who's 22, you probably aren't getting as big of a ceiling. I still hold
Right.
true to that. But for a team that's sitting here saying, we actually don't really care about the high ceiling, we want a guy who can step in and can eat up 15 minutes a game as a rookie, who by year
Right.
three is playing 25 high impactful minutes. Jalen Williams is our best case scenario, but just a Dante DiVincenzo serviceable guy is our worst case scenario. And that seems like the range that the Minnesota Timberwolves are walking in. I like it. Like, I mean, again, I'm just trying to build a roster of 7 guys. Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels, Dante DiVincenzo, Naz Reid, and Julius Randle. That's 6, right? Now you're hoping that some combination of Rob Dillingham, Terrence Shannon Jr., Pooh Lewis, and Kaishan Ship can get you to, can one of those guys be number 7? Can you get 2 of them to be 7 and 8? That's your playoff rotation. It's 8 guys. 8, maybe 9 if you're really lucky and you're the Oklahoma City Thunder. I don't know that Minnesota's too far away from that. And this is a team that's made back-to-back conference finals, even though they haven't really shown up in either of them. Sniper, this is still a team that has shown the capability to get there.
Yep. They're knocking at the door and they want to win now and they drafted like they wanted to win now.
So speaking of winning now, in a season in which the draft lottery saw like a 0.01% likelihood order of the Spurs, or excuse me, the Mavericks, the Spurs, and the Sixers land in the top 3. 3 teams that finished respectfully. Dallas was 10th in the West. Philadelphia was bottom 3, right? They entered at number 6, and the Spurs entered in bottom 6 as well. They had bottom 3 in the West, but that put them ahead of everyone except the top 10 teams in the Eastern Conference. We've seen in this offseason a lot of moves that don't really feel like tanking moves. Like the Pelicans gave up an unprotected first-round pick next season to move up to number 13 so that they could take Jermaine McElmore out of Miami. So they clearly liked him a lot. The Utah Jazz are making the addition of Jalen Snow, huge ceiling guy, with Lamarian Sherwood, who's definitely one that is more in that win now category. The Spurs obviously are the Spurs. Portland is kind of getting frisky with their draft picks, and they don't seem like they're gearing up to necessarily trying to lose. Phoenix is not trying to lose. Memphis, I mean, like we could go team by team. It really feels like every single team, maybe outside of Washington, Charlotte, and Brooklyn, they're not going the tanking route, Sniper. At least that's not the perception that they're giving off right now.
No, I mean, I feel like just being a scout and seeing how the league is transforming, it's hard to tank when you can win with non-superstars. Like
Mm-hmm.
some of these teams, like we talked about, have one star, and the rest of these guys are, hey, we're just gonna get it out the mud, fill in, and do our job. And it's so many guys in the league. That's why it's so hard to get in the SWBA because you got to go take someone's spot that's really good at what they do, and it's not a star. That's the reason why it's so hard to get in. But these teams, they can win with these no-name stars, and it's hard to tank when you feel like there's pieces out there that you could put together if you do it correctly and win.
And you know what's interesting is that we saw like in the lead up to this season, and it feels very much like now that the dust has settled on Dallas moving up to number one and like the improbability of that pick and everything that followed. Um, Cooper Flag was, this, hey, Cooper Flag's an awesome pick. He's can't miss. Dylan Harper not far behind him. Like we were locked in at
Hmm.
those guys number 1 and 2 pretty much from the midway point of the regular season. Or I guess really I should say they would have been, and then they were locked in once they actually made the approval to move over. I would say that next season's draft, in my opinion, and I'm not certainly as scouted up as you are, but it appears like next season's draft is better, right? Like there's a little bit more depth. It might not be the best. Cooper Flag might be better than the guys coming in next season, but there's a lot more competition of talent right below it, right? You've got Arthur Lattimore, D'Angelo Jordan, Justin Bell, Nas Hall as kind of like this quartet of sophomores that have just been fantastic. It surprises me that teams aren't making a more concerted effort to say, let's get to the bottom so we can lock in one of these four guys who play this extra important position of being a wing in the SWBA.
Absolutely. And the next year draft is incredibly deep, and you still have the guys that came back to school like D. Woodley, Ladarius Outlaw,
Yes.
people like that's going back to school, which is going to make this draft even more deeper. Man, it's honestly going to be an exciting time. And speaking of tanking, I think some of these teams about close to the midway point of the season, they're going to start tanking just to get some of these guys, especially if they're performing well and doing what they're supposed to be doing on the SimWorld U level.
And I think that the interesting part of it is you don't so like there's two things and I guess they kind of play into one another. Like yes, you want to get the best chance of getting D'Angelo Jordan or Justin Bell or whoever it is that you think that should be the number one pick. I feel like I'm constantly oscillating on who I want or who I would like to have as the number one pick. But like you don't there's what maybe six guys who probably are in the conversation for the number one pick, like the six that we just mentioned. I'm trying to think through if there's anybody else that just is not coming to mind right now in terms of a top end talent. um,
Right.
like you can be the eighth worst team, contend for a play-in spot, and still get pretty good odds at grabbing one of those four guys or top six guys and
Yeah.
ending up with a difference maker at the next level.
Yep. You can do exactly what Dallas did this year.
Yeah. And you got an
Exactly.
even better chance because you could land a guy at 5 who in other drafts might be number 1.
100%. Because this next draft, I mean, the talent is unreal, and I think we know eight guys that we just named, but I think there's also going to be some guys that rise. That they got some sleepers that is working extremely hard, and there's like two to three of them that's just going to climb the draft boards
Right.
immediately as soon as they hit the floor in SimWorld U. And now you're gonna be looking at them like, well, is he better than? Does he belong in the top five? Is he top 10? Is he lottery? And that makes it all the more interesting.
Yeah, does where does Damian Luffy get? Who falls in love with Damian Luffy? Who falls in love with Royce Anderson? Guys that are might be projected like mid lottery. Is reminded of Freddie Stonewall and Aji Feshbenley as guys that were really dominant and says, hey, at number 9 we're gonna. I'm excited for this. Or I mean, by the way, Jezreel Wright Johnson. As I'm looking through these rosters, 17 a game last season at Colorado State. I mean, there's some
There you.
to speak of guys that could kind of come out of nowhere. There's one for you. I'm excited. I like the trend now that this is settled and the Mavericks have Cooper Flag and it's over with. I like this. I've gone on the record saying I think that the top 20 teams should be in the lottery to incentivize teams to not only try to make the playoffs, but make the playoffs and still get this outside chance of getting a top pick. And, does that ruin parity? Maybe the rich just stay rich, but like right now, what's the incentive between being an 8 seed and being the 10 seed, right? Like you really do
Yeah.
want to stay in the lottery because we see teams like Dallas, who were the number 10 team in the West, get the number 1 pick. Memphis could have lost 2 in a row and had the same odds and gotten the number 1 pick. Like to me, it feels almost like this. It's incentivized teams to contend, but not contend too much. Like you don't want to make it too far because then you actually don't get the benefits of being mediocre.
Right, 100%. And I think they should change that too. But that's a different talk, and that's a different organization, different league. But I 100% agree with you. Sometimes we need to reward the teams that have been doing their job.
Right. Do the job, and you know what? Give yourself a little nugget of benefit by the end of it. All right, Sniper. I appreciate you jumping on. We'll talk with you next week. The SimWorld prep off season rolling around. I'm excited for a lot of these basketball without borders matchups coming up across the globe. So we'll get the insider scout take as those start ramping up here in the next few weeks. But as always, Sniper, great to chat with you. We'll talk to you again next Wednesday, and we'll talk to you all tomorrow morning here on SimWorld TV, the only place you can see the game, be the game.